Is the new Milo album good? We're going to find out on this episode of the Mostly Existential Podcast. Super generic bass and as an intro. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Mostly Existential Podcast. My name is Justin.
I'm Kenneth.
And we're coming at you with a brand new review today. We're going to be checking out Milo's Who Taught You to Think with a lot of...
Who told you to think?
You know, you messed me up because you said the album a little wrong in the last episode. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh no, that's wrong. And I'm sorry.
I didn't like course correct that.
No.
Are you sure?
No, there were like extra words. It was like, I'm fairly positive there are extra words in there.
I'm going to trust you on that. I'm a little skeptical. But
I'll send you a little MP3 file of just
a small,
just us saying the album wrong.
Just put it into this cast. Just clip it right in. Oh, jeez.
For sure. But yeah, new album from Milo.
Love Milo.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting record. A lot of stuff to say about it.
Yes.
But before we get into that, we're going to get into some brief music news. One thing I just want to touch on, and I don't really want to get into it, so I guess I kind of have two things because they're both real small. One of them I don't really want to get into because some other people have also covered this, like Anthony Fantano and stuff, and I like decided I wanted to bring this article forward, and then I saw like Anthony Fantano made a video about it like that day.
Yeah. Okay.
The Cash Me Outside girl, she got a record deal with Atlantic Records.
I'm not surprised. She
released like a whole video with a song called These Hoes, spelled Heaux. And
is she from New Orleans? Like, what is like?
Honestly, I have no idea. The entire thing is an enigma.
Yeah.
And the weird part is too, I think, I don't know, Atlantic Records basically was just like, oh, she has undeniable talent or whatever. And it's like, okay, regardless of how you feel about her as a person, I've watched the music video. I've listened to the song.
Yes. She
doesn't, is the thing, have talent is the problem of the thing.
I think we're having a sort of upswing of like social media personalities getting like trying to get music careers, especially rap, because the thing is
you can fake rap pretty easy.
Fake rap very easily. That's the one thing I will say is kind of, you know, I guess I can understand people from the outside kind of like, I really don't want to check out rap, because when they see things like this about, you know, there's another dude, he's like, I know this is going to sound bad, but like he's white.
Jake Paul.
He also, I think, also has like some sort of weird budding rap career or something like that. And so we're kind of like looking at this whole like, okay, these social media people who, I mean, I guess Jake Paul's a little more understandable because he at least had like,
he had an established presence before just a viral video, you know,
exactly.
Like he had established a following, and he was also like on a Disney Channel show and stuff.
Yeah.
So he like, it made sense that he was popular, but like the Cash Me Outside thing is like, it's like a stupid thing that happened really once, and it was just like look at how stupid this person is, ha ha ha, and then I thought we all moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly everyone checked out the song out of pure curiosity, like I did.
Absolutely.
So it's weird. I'm sure her contract is probably terrible.
The most egregious 360 you can imagine.
And it's like it's literally just like anything she does, Atlantic Records is probably just going to be making money off of while it's still relevant. And I think they know that she's a very short-term money thing, and so that's okay.
I would imagine they probably gave her a lot of money up front, and then, which, I mean, in all honesty, another thing I criticize, like, you know, I guess in the rap, like, sort of greater cultures, there are bad contracts everywhere. And that's why I said like the 360 deal of like, we're going to give you a lot of money up front, but we're going to take money from everything else. So all the merch, all the CD sales, you're touring, we're going to take.
That's prevalent in like every genre too. Like
probably every genre.
They're just record deals. Like people are steering more and more away from them and moving towards independence because you do have so many shady deals out there. Yeah.
I just think the whole Cash Me Outside Girl thing, and I will just keep it moving because I know you want to keep it moving, but I think it's very unfortunate because she is kind of playing up these sort of negative stereotypes that are placed upon, you know, people of color, especially, you know, poor people of color. And she's being rewarded as such because of this, you know, oh, she's this white girl acting like this and it's so stupid, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we can have a laugh, but now she's able to monetize off of that.
Right. And it's like no person of color can monetize off of this. Exactly. But like this white person who's more or less just like living in this different culture that she's not even really a part of is just like able to just rake in all this cash for it.
Because I was doing some investigative work about her, and I found out that, you know, she was on Dr. Phil and it didn't blow up like instantly. Mm-hmm. Like it had some time, and she was actually like going to behavioral therapy and whatever. But then when she saw how popular it was, she doubled down and then was able to monetize off of it. It's like, guys, come on,
for real.
So
I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I do have one other piece of somehow stranger news. For some reason, and in the year 2017. We have a new single from Evanescence.
What?
I know.
Oh my! Whoa!
A new single to promote a new LP from Evanescence. Now, a huge asterisk when I say new LP. They're calling it an album, and for the most part, it is. But it's pretty much made up of just like remixes and new versions of old songs, including classic hits such as Bring Me to Life.
I think that's the only Evanescence. Oh no, I know 2 Evanescence songs.
But there's 2 original songs on the album, and the rest are like just remakes and remixes and all that. And it just kind of begs the question, why? Apparently, so that this I forgot to mention the Cash Me Out
or something.
I don't know. But
you forgot to mention something.
Yeah, the Cash Me Outside thing that came to us from Variety.com. That was the one that I saw initially posted the story. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Variety.com for that. This Evanescence article comes to us from Rolling Stone. Always usually up to date with music things. But so I'm guessing they're also doing touring and stuff, but it's been so many years since their last album. And this just seems like such an odd step to take, especially because apparently after this, they're going to be doing like a real album, like made up of legitimate songs. And it just begs the question, why did you do this to begin with?
Right.
It just seems like a strange way to revitalize something that like doesn't have a lot of steam. Right now.
And that's kind of what I was thinking of, just like, I can understand when, you know, your Evanescence and, you know, the kind of peak of your career was like that early aughts sort of time. Okay. And so the iron is dead cold for you guys. And so you want to do something to kind of, you know, get people kind of talking.
Yeah.
But this is not, I don't think this is the way to do it, because you are releasing, unless they're making it free, which I highly doubt that they would do that.
I mean, I think they worked with like a good composer to make like new orchestral versions of these songs.
Okay, so it's orchestral versions or something.
I don't know if it's exclusively that, but I know like for sure there's like some orchestral version of like Bring Me to Life and all that.
Okay, because I was about to say, I'm like, are we getting like Bring Me to Life / After Hours mix? Like, what are we getting? Like really like silly names for these remixes? But yeah, so I will say though, I want to do a mini review of that album. Not like we're gonna do a whole album, because I don't know if I could really take that much Evanescence. Maybe, but just like, oh hey, we'll do like, oh, is this album good? And then in the middle, like after news stories, we're like, oh hey, yeah, we checked out that Evanescence album, and then just kind of go on. I'm joking. We'll talk about that later. But it's just kind of like, it's very weird and like from left field.
Yeah, it's a very strange decision to me, and I find for some reason a lot of bands have been putting out like one-off singles.
Yeah.
Within the past several months, which is already a little weird for me. But then to see something like this, it seems like you put a lot of effort into this thing that's sounds like a greatest hits CD deluxe edition. Right. You know what I mean? And they've already done something like that too. This isn't the first time that they put out like remixes and stuff.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like, is there not already an orchestral version of Bring Me to Life that exists? Like,
I don't know, but I'm fairly certain that there's like another remix album out there. And it just begs the question of why. I don't know.
Can we? I'm gonna see if I could tweet at Evanescence and be like, "Hey, just read this article, but like, why?" Just release the album.
For real.
Or just like take the 2 original like songs, put them in the album, release them as singles or something, since you're already fairly comfortable with their completeness, I guess, I would assume.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably a smart financial decision. I just don't know that much about it. Yeah.
I think it's kind of one of those things where you're like hedging a little bit, where like, if I can understand, like, as somebody who's, you know, at a record company is like, I do numbers, we're concerned about making money, so let's do this and kind of see where everybody's at with Evanescence, and then we can make a realistic goal for how much we need to push your album because of it.
And it can also, I mean, it can be a number of things. A lot of times bands will put out like re-releases of albums and stuff to fulfill contracts.
True.
That is a very common thing. A lot of times when you see these like deluxe reissues of albums that have like 1 or 2 new songs on it, and it's more or less the same thing, different packaging, it's just to fulfill an album requirement, so that way they can finish up a deal that maybe isn't so good. And a lot of times it's so that way then they can finish up that deal and leverage a better deal with other companies. So that's really not uncommon. And so we could be seeing some fulfillment of contracts here, especially if Evanescence is, maybe they are a little like kind of tired right now and they're just kind of wanting to get out of this contract.
Yeah.
It could be any number of things. So I don't want to just jump to conclusions, but it's certainly weird to see that.
So now I want to hear this next album whenever that day is, because I want to know is like, if you're doing 2 original songs and some remixes, are you wanting to go a completely kind of different way with the new album? Are you like, this article springs a lot of questions for me for a band that I don't particularly care that much about.
Yeah.
But like, I want to know now. I'm like, so how's Evanescence going to sound X amount of years later after, you know, this? Are we going to go for the same kind of sound? Are we doing something different? Like, what do we have going on right here? Yeah,
definitely begs questions. And hopefully we'll see what that future looks like over the next, while. You have an article to bring to the table, coming to us from NPR.
Shouts out to NPR.
Absolutely. Do you want to take us through the article here?
So, oh man, I don't even know where to start, because like, it's a big article and it's got a lot in it, but it's just, I guess for me, the idea is very interesting.
For sure.
So, a federal judge ruled that the first verse of the popular civil rights era song "We Shall Overcome" is now public domain. And it comes from a guy who I believe, if I read the article correctly, was making a sort of documentary about the song, because that song is very, prominent within the Black community. Like, it feels like I heard it actually everywhere growing up. Like, of course, I would hear it like at school during like Black History Month or whatever, but like we would sing that song in church. Like it was one of those things where I grew up hearing the song everywhere, and you grow up hearing a lot of different like songs everywhere. So, and because of the nature of the song, I originally didn't even know that somebody actually owned rights to it.
Right. And that's the thing with a lot of those songs that you just like hear for so long, you don't think about who owns the rights to it, because it just feels like one of those things that's passed down, but of course someone had to write the song.
Right. And I mean, and they were saying here in the article that it was a song that's kind of been over time changed and tweaked from, they would assume, like more sort of organic roots, because a lot of songs are that there are still a lot of songs that, again, I sang in church and heard in church all growing up that are just completely passed down spirituals from the slave era. And so they were saying that We Shall Overcome might have its roots there. So for somebody to kind of have, rights over it was interesting. And then, it does say that song has writers. It does say that the song has rights. And then also I think a organization or church in Tennessee would actually get royalties from that song and kind of give a lot of that money out to people who needed it. So that's definitely going to affect them.
Right.
Because We Shall Overcome has multiple verses, obviously. But you only really know the first one. And so that's where a lot of people kind of, want to, quote or, make reference to.
Right. And it's saying here that's just that first verse.
Yeah, just the first
public
verse.
domain.
Right. And so that's also strange to me as well, that just the first verse, because later in the article it says that the person who's making that documentary still can't release the film because the rest of the song is still under rights.
Right.
And that's just strange to me. Like it's I didn't even know that this was like a thing. Like I said, I didn't even know that song had rights to it. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting because I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Happy Birthday became public domain.
Really?
Oh yeah, it really wasn't that long ago. I'm gonna search it right now because I'm curious about the date, but I really don't think it was like even that ago. Yeah, it was literally 2016. There was like a settlement in court and declared that Happy Birthday to You, the official song title, became public domain. So yeah, you would legitimately, if you were going to use that for commercial purposes, would have to license.
Really?
Yep. And renditions of Happy Birthday technically would need a license as well. So new recordings of Happy Birthday, which seems so ludicrous because it's of course like so ingrained into us, but you also have to remember that someone did write that song.
That's true.
So it's so interesting, but it's also at the same point where like sometimes it gets to a certain point where it's so ingrained in a culture that it's almost unfair to say you can't do anything with that because it's greater than what it was. It's no longer just this song you'll listen to. It becomes ingrained in a culture to the point where it's like you can't strip that out. The damage is done, if you will. Like no one. Here's the thing: is no one was profiting off of Happy Birthday to You.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that doesn't sell anything.
I just imagine like us at like your birthday party last year at like Tagliati. We start singing and people just kicked down like the glass. Like, hey, you can't do that. But no, you're definitely right on point with saying something so ingrained in a culture, because I feel that We Shall Overcome is so ingrained in that culture. Anytime I see a Martin Luther King Jr. documentary, that song always plays. If I ever go to church ever again, I'm sure I'll hear it again. But the ruling was that there were changes from a song called We Will Overcome to We Shall Overcome, and a little bit of a change to the melody. And so the judge ruled that that was not enough to kind of, or what did it say exactly? That
I think it said that those changes were small.
Shall and the melody lacked originality, and the verse belongs in the public domain.
Interesting. That is interesting, because I know that the argument for keeping those rights were the change from will to shall, though it's small, is a monumental change.
Yes.
That totally revamps and revitalizes the tune. And, I'm sure there's argument to be had on both sides with that. And
I can also think of it like at the time, I can understand to people who are on the outside, potentially We Will Overcome sounding a little more aggressive than We Shall. Not saying that had anything to do with it, but it's just like, no, it definitely, I can understand how somebody's like, no, that's a big change.
Right.
So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think we're gonna get into our review.
Yes.
Of the album from Milo. So a lot with this record. Trying to decide if I want to go like track by track or just go with my general thoughts at the beginning.
Just hit us with your general thoughts, and then I'll hit you with my general thoughts, and then we'll just unpack it track by track. I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
Because there's so much.
Yeah, for sure. So initially, as far as the tones of the record are concerned, you're kind of met with these very upfront vocals, with very dry sound to them, but I think it's really so that way the words can sink in. At times there's a little more to be desired out of the production, because there's a very finite bag of tricks with the production. With pretty much the only real effect being what sounds like just an outboard delay unit that Milo plays with on a lot of the vocals, which sometimes can feel like, okay, I heard this, let's move on, kind of thing. But I also know that when it does work, it really does work, and it adds a new element to the recording, and one that if it wasn't there, this could be a much more static album. That one effect really does add a lot.
And I think it also kind of doubles down on this idea, because I know it was kind of alluded to that parts of this album were like a transmission, if that makes sense. I think he said something about it where I think, one thing that I do appreciate that Milo does is, again, this theme very, very heavy. This album's themed very, very heavy about poetry and how important poets are. That's how the beginning, track starts with James Baldwin, very prominent figure. He was like, poets are important in this and that.
Absolutely.
And so he definitely rhymes like that. But I think there was a moment, and he said, and I also appreciate that sometimes he just talks. And he said, my transmission began when Diamond asked Cole why so yielding. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, so is, and I could be wrong, but is him using those delays kind of going with that idea that this is a transmission of some sorts of and so to kind of mimic that whole I don't know what the term is for transmissions when they're like delayed and getting all choppy and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's there, but it was kind of one of those things where I was like, oh, that could possibly be this.
One thing I was reading into is the whole delay unit thing. So from my understanding, he's doing that live during the take. And that's actually to in part emulate his live performance, in which he apparently does the same thing.
Yes.
So it kind of brings that element of his live show of playing with vocal effects while performing. And so he's doing that while he's, in the booth and all that, which is very cool. And I could tell it was someone playing with knobs, because there's certain moments I was like, you can't just, it would take so long to do it with software. Like you could, but it would just be so arduous when you could just move knobs around.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was just like an actual, delay unit. Also, one thing that's interesting is that the album was recorded in 24 hours.
Really?
It was, yeah. Like, that's crazy to me. And some of the songs weren't even written until the recording session. So the more minimalist aesthetic of the record makes sense, knowing that it was recorded in such a brief time. And so it was just this really long recording session. Nothing too fancy.
Which is very interesting, because when I hear things like that of like, oh, I'm doing this recording session in 24 hours, the sheer number of songs he got out of that 24 hours is very impressive.
For sure.
Especially with features. I'm like, so did people just kind of come in, or did...
I don't know if that counted towards the 24 hours. I know his... Because I know he would ask people, He asked people to do verses and stuff. So the main thing about this record is, of course, the lyrics. And like you said, poetry is such an important element to these songs, in both references and also just his cadence, the
way he rhymes,
he rhymes, all of that. And you end up with some very, very dense material. Every song lyrically is so dense. And it's one of those things, it's so packed full that you could spend hours just reading and examining the lyrics. And the thing is, he clearly draws influence from art of all kinds.
Yep.
And because he references anything from, books to poems to photography things. He references so many different things. And every time it's one of those things where, even if you don't get the reference, you understand that there's something heavy behind what he's saying. And so it's even if you're not sure exactly what he's getting at, because even if the references go over your head, which a lot probably will, especially on an initial few listens, honestly, I had to sit there on Rap Genius and click all the little things of just what the hell did he mean?
I had to do the same thing of just okay, you hear the album 2-3 times, so let me sit down and what did I miss? And you can tell that he's a very well-informed, just type of human being, and it's reflective in his music. And at first, when I first heard of Milo, I actually was kind of it was not something I was really used to, but I gave it more and more listens, and over time I'm like, no, this is actually, I really like the methodicalness he kind of comes off with his rhymes and everything, but it also feels in the same way organic, this is just how he thinks. Yeah, for sure. It's not like he was spending it was recorded in 24 hours, so in some of the material wasn't even written, so it's okay, when he makes music, this is just how he thinks, this is his mindset. And I think we get, even though his lyrics and his rhymes are very dense, you still know that feeling that, okay, this is just how his mind works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you get a lot of insight to his personal views and his opinions about things. And
nothing feels forced. That's what I'm like trying to get at. It's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're good. But it's like nothing feels forced.
Yeah.
Feels forced when I listen to him.
It definitely comes across as like organic and not like he's trying to play a certain part. Mm-hmm. It feels everything from the production to his vocal delivery is very close to home.
Yes.
And I think the lack of flash, the lack of, ear candy stuff makes it kind of forces the listener to really listen to what he's saying.
Yes.
The vocals are extremely upfront, and his enunciation is very clear. You can tell what he's saying, and then it's up to you to figure out what the hell he's saying.
Yeah.
So this album was, to me, had a lot of excellent things, but did suffer from a few problems. Because it had a very finite bag of tricks. There are moments where, even though he's still coming off brilliant in his delivery and everything, it's just so similar to other songs that it's like, I'm not sure why I'm supposed to care still. And yeah, there's still, of course, the value in the words, and reading along with the lyrics still makes these tracks that are maybe less interesting still very much enjoyable. But especially on like pass through listens, or like when you don't have the time to dissect the words, some of them come off a little redundant because the style is so, for the most part, consistent throughout the record. So I'm going to start the track by track here. Poet, of course.
Great opening.
Yeah, absolutely perfect opening. I think it's highly engaging, and it feels twice its length in a good way. Like it's because it has these sections and it has movement, you feel carried through the tune, and it kind of sets a lyrical tone for the record. Of course, giving you the idea of poetry being extremely important. And you even, in his little verse in there, shows you what the lyrical style is going to be like.
Yes.
And that, I think, makes it a great opener.
I also like that he opened and closed that track with James Baldwin.
For sure.
Because James Baldwin kind of gives you an opening. He does his verse, and then he was like, okay, no, poets, at the end, he's like, poets are meant to deliver a message. Poets are this, that, and the third. And it's like, okay, great. And so now we're, kind of a great doorway to this album, what Milo's thinking about, theming it with James Baldwin. It's like, okay, we can, move forward. And
for sure. And then the second track, Landscaping with Ousside.
I love Ousside. Like
his verse is killer on this tune.
He has another song on Milo's last album. I'll have to just shoot you the song. He also has a great verse there. And I just like him as an artist. Like, I love Ousside. He's got a presence about him with the way his voice sounds and the way that he rhymes. Also, because his rhyme style is a little more closer to, I guess, traditional against Milo's, you kind of get that difference because Milo's still going at his poetic way, and then you get a guy on here who's like rapping. Not to say that, like, Milo's not rapping. Don't get me wrong, but like you have somebody who has a little more traditional, like, beat writing sort of rhymes on it, and it's like, okay, that establishes a presence and separates himself from Milo. One thing that I will say is all the other features, while I think, all the other rappers did a good job, because they have more of that poetic sound, it's kind of a little closer to what Milo's doing.
Right.
It gives them a little less of a presence on a song. Whereas Ousside was like, no, here we go.
And it's definitely interesting too, because you see Landscaping, I think, serves as a good, like, first full track of the record too, because you have Milo coming straight out of the gate with just amazing use of vocabulary.
Yes.
And just very in your face delivery. And he starts out like a little more jovial with his wordplay in a way that's very interesting. Like he has the line, "I'm Muriel crying Eustace in that building lobby. Oh, and my courage is such a cowardly dog."
Yeah, I love that line.
That was such a just cool line. And it's just funny because like you don't see a ton of stuff like that on this record because that's not what this record is about.
Yeah.
But you do kind of see that on this opening track, and it kind of gets deeper as the track continues, more beyond the surface level, especially with Ousside just kind of punctuating the thought-provoking attitudes with like, "I voted for a human wage when living as a protest. I can't get free without you." Just like that, I was like, damn.
Right. I also like even the more simpler lines with that Ousside verse of just like, "I love wild things wildly. I love quiet things quietly." And I'm like, yeah, no, totally. One thing I will say though is I love that Milo is, will sometimes finish bars without rhyming them.
Yes, absolutely.
I enjoy that so much. Also, back to his verse, I think there was something that was very important, and I don't remember the line verbatim, but he was talking about how like a lot of times people's ideas are like, he's like, "You're like a parrot. The words don't belong to you. You're just mimicking sounds." And it's like, oh, okay, like, all right,
Absolutely. And that's not the first time he suggests ideas like that, especially when he's talking about the current state of like the rap industry, stuff like that. He has a lot to say about that, and he very much feels like people are just playing a part.
Yes.
And you definitely see that on that song expressed and throughout other tunes as well. And this moves into a song that immediately stuck out to me, "Call and Form." Just immediately, I love the instrumental of this tune. I just love the like modulated crap that's going on. It's so cool sounding and provides this darkness that some of the beats, I will say, kind of blend together on this album, but this is one of those ones that doesn't. This is one of those ones that stand out. And there are some others that also really stand out to me, but this one was an instant favorite of mine because of just the kind of ethereal nature to it that was extremely enticing. And even lyrically, it's a really great tune as well. Honestly, nothing negative to say about this track particularly. I will say, a kind of general thoughts, I do sometimes wish that these were more fleshed out songs.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, it's like one or two verses and an outro. And so they still have like a structure.
Absolutely.
But you're not. Sometimes like, I almost wish that some of the songs that aren't as strong, those verses were like put together for a whole song. Because there'll be like a great verse, but it's like a beat that's just really similar to a beat I've already heard on the record.
Yeah.
And if you would have just maybe put those two verses together that maybe express some similar ideas, maybe put some kind of hook in there, whatever. Doesn't have to be like bombastic or anything, but you would come out with a more fleshed out product and you wouldn't need to make a 15-track album of 2.5-minute songs.
So do you think that might be a result of having that 24-hour like recording process of like
Quite
you do
possibly.
what you can and then you really don't want to stick onto something for too long, because if you do, you run the risk of not like, putting out other product and stuff like that?
Maybe. I don't know. And I don't even know if it was like, I don't know if it was like a self-imposed challenge or what. I just read that he said that it was recorded within 24 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was like his intention or if he was like, I have to get this done in 24 hours. I don't know what the story behind that was. But yeah, Call and Form, definitely like an instant stick out for me. Magician is it's a really fast moving track that I just love the driving bass line. And this is one of those tracks that I would love to complain that it's too short, but at the same time, this song lyrically is just so dense that like I can't even complain that it's short, because it would take you like an hour to dissect it. So it's one of those things that's like, I can't even complain about that one. I can't even complain about that one being short because there's already so much going on lyrically.
And again, we were just saying more times, that's, you know, what I appreciate about him is like, even when you have shorter songs, it's like you still have, it's not like he's just giving you short songs of nothing. You still have things to unpack in these short songs. There are other times where there's more or less to unpack, but it's just like, even, you know, with songs like Magician, like, even though it's short, there's still a lot. Like, okay, you know, if this song was longer, that'd be cool, but it's like, there's, what else? I also feel that a lot of times when he has these shorter songs and, you know, with his lyrical style being so packed as it is, sometimes it feels like he said everything he needed to say.
Yeah.
And kind of just, all right, on
for
to
sure.
the next one. Sometimes that is a detriment when you feel like certain songs aren't finished or they're not complete or whatever. But I feel that that's also a strength because sometimes it's like you said everything you needed to say.
Absolutely.
In this short amount of time, and you're giving me the layer cake or whatever you want to call it. And now it's my turn to digest this and kind of keep it moving.
For sure. And the next tune, The Young Man Has a Point, which is already funny because it features Young Man.
Young Man, yeah. So this particular song was a grower for me. When I heard it the first time, I didn't like it. But then as I listened to it more, I turned on it because I do like that it's kind of an exchange of dialogue between them both.
Yeah.
And Young Man's presenting an idea of like him, you know, going through this process of some, like, you know, somebody getting shot or somebody killing somebody or telling somebody how to do that. And then at the end, he's like, it solves nothing, or, you know, it means nothing, or whatever it was that he said. And then Milo kind of picks it up. And he's like, oh, thinking on the matter, da 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 da. And I was like, oh, okay.
It definitely does have like an interesting exchange of dialogue. And this is probably one of the more like, I don't know, one of the more jovial points of the record because there's so much just like straight up wordplay for sake of wordplay. And he shows that he's like both of them show that they're like an amazing wordsmith and they can just pack so many crazy things together in such a small space. But for me, it was definitely one of the least impactful tunes, at least lyrically, because it did just kind of have like reference after reference and just interesting wordplay bits. But I think I was there with you where it was kind of a grower for me, especially because there is kind of this like tongue-in-cheek nature to it.
Yeah.
Especially with the line, my vocabulary pays my rent.
Yeah, I love
because
that
it's
line.
Just like, yeah, he could say all this ridiculous things and I could sit here and criticize it, but he's literally paying his rent because he has a good vocabulary.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that because it is kind of self-aware in that, it makes it a more enjoyable tune for me. And I will say I definitely was kind of with you on it not being a super standout. Now the next track though, Pablum. I don't know how to pronounce that honestly.
I would go with Pablum.
This was one of those tracks that didn't really stand out to me too much.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much to say about it. Like it was good, but like it didn't really do anything different from the previous tracks. Like the instrumental was decent, but it's pretty much just par for the course.
Yeah.
At this point in the record, and it just very forgettable for me because of that. And it's one of those things where if you didn't show me the previous songs and just showed me this song, I'm sure I would be impressed with it.
Yeah.
But because I just had the last 3 tracks, this one just kind of comes off as a little redundant. And this is the first of a few different times where I'm kind of left with this feeling of mild redundancy. The next track, however, oh my God, Note to Misses. Oh my God. I mean, it's probably the most different track on the album. But this track instantly wowed me, and it's one that I keep going back to because it really is so different from the rest of the record, and it's like subdued delivery and beautiful poetic analogy. And it just makes this almost haunting song just stick with you for far long after it's finished. He also, go ahead.
It feels like this sort of like jolt to the system when you're just going straight through the album. And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you move on from there. And so like, I love its placement.
Oh yeah.
Because and I will say this, that even though these are shorter songs, because of the way he's choosing because of the production on it or whatever, this album feels longer than what it is.
Yeah.
So when you get to Note to Mrs., like I was listening to this when I was on my way to therapy, and when I got to Note to Mrs., I was like, oh, I realized that one, I'd been driving for 40 minutes, and two, it felt like I was listening to the song longer than I was, but also at the same time I was replaying tracks. Like,
right.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, and lyrically, he just really shows that you can do a lot with a little. Yes. This isn't a word heavy song. It's probably got some of the smallest word count of any of the other songs. Save one other track that we'll get to. That's like my least favorite track. But with this one, just the amazing comparisons he makes with like the "Your Love Be" lines near the end. Oh, it's such a stellar track that just shows the poetic influences. And honestly, I'm wowed every time I listen to it. Really can't say enough positive things about this track. It was one of my favorites instantly. Still one of my favorites on the record too. Then the next tune is Paging Mr. Bill Nunn.
I love this track. I love Paging Mr. Bill Nunn because Milo does this thing where he, at the beginning of this record, when he starts rapping, he just has a little aside where he's kind of rapping in a more traditional, like, kind of flow. And you get just a small snippet of it. And then he just goes to doing back to what he's doing. And I think it's really cool because he's alluded to this before in previous albums where he's like, I think it was, When the Flies Don't Come, his last album, I forget which song it was, but he said a line, he's like, I can rap like whatever, I can rap like my last name was Black Man, kind of like that, kind of playing up to the stereotype of what rappers should sound like. And so when he starts this beat, like he's done that a couple other times in like other records where he kind of just has more traditional flow. And I just like that he gave a little snippet of it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then he goes into, his rap. I kind of like I don't know. For me, it felt like this beat had a little bit of bounce to it, and I was like,
for sure,
yeah, I can get with this. And with that bounce, you're still contrasting with his rhyme style, always making you focus on what he's saying.
Absolutely, and this track too was again another example of his brilliant wordplay, and also just a lot of deep insight to him as a person and his views, which was definitely interesting. There's also one of the only tracks where he like lets the instrumental ride for like a good bit. Yeah. Usually it's just like a little bit and then he's rapping and then he's got an outro. Yeah. This one has like a whole section where you're just listening to the beat. And that's definitely interesting. It also is interesting because it like introduces like the idea of the sorcerer. Yeah. The subject of the next track. So it's like very interesting because it plays into that tune. And this is one of the few times, I mean, he has like references, especially like you have song titles that like kind of go together, like Call in Form, the subtitle is Picture, Magician, the subtitle is Suture, and Young Man Has a Point, subtitle Nurture. Yeah. These three tracks, of course, have that like title interplay there. Then you have Note to Mrs., Paging Mr. Bill Nunn. And then, of course, we have that song referencing Sorcerer, the next tune. I will say, I feel like I might need to listen to Paging Mr. Bill Nunn some more because it wasn't like a huge standout for me. I loved the wordplay and all that stuff, but it didn't stick out to me as one of my favorites. But now that you're being all excited about it, I'm going to have to give it some more listens.
I'm pulling up some lyrics right now, so just follow. I should have taken screenshots of these and followed these around, but
Well, I'll start talking about Sorcerer while you're doing that. This one, you mentioned how one of the things you loved about Bill Nunn was how he had those snippets of very like typical vocal delivery.
Yeah, it's just his first verse.
Mm-hmm. But Sorcerer, I feel like, is the one that has the most typical vocal delivery, and it has it a lot throughout this track. And it's probably the most like accessible tune, with it being a very modern styled rap delivery that you see even in some pop rap songs and stuff like that. And so that made it a very interesting thing. It's got a really driving beat and delivery. And I think because it does have that familiarity of that delivery, it kind of makes it, like a banger in a sense.
Yeah.
Like as far as Milo goes.
I will say though that page to Bill Nunn, I will say that for me personally, he has 2 verses and an outro, and I'm like, okay, I personally felt like that song could have had a little bit more to it. Especially because the instrumental was a little bit bare bones, even though it did have that beat. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take off.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Sorcerer also has like the second reference to like lag time, and I think that's really funny.
Yeah.
Because he also mentioned I believe I believe it's Colin Form that he says something about packet loss and latency.
Yeah.
I know what lag is.
I know what lag is.
And I love that line, because hearing someone in a song say packet loss and latency was like the highlight of my nerdy life. Like that was beautiful to me. I like the first time I think that's one of the reasons why that song stood out to me at first too, Colin Form, because like I heard that song and then like that line came on. I was like, did he just say packet loss?
Right. And then just with the ad lib in the background of like, I know what lag is. Like you just, okay, great.
And then you have him talking about lag time in Sorcerer. So I thought that was pretty interesting to have that idea of lag and latency again represented. You have the lyrics to Paging Bill Nunn?
No, I'm on Sorcerer right now.
Oh, okay.
So we're kind of moving forward.
You good to move to the next track?
Yes.
Okay, so Take Advantage of the Naysayer. I feel like this is really interesting because you kind of get a look into a little bit of his childhood struggles in a very thought-provoking way. And it also has a very blatant self-awareness of knowing he's not a typical rapper and knowing he's not going to appeal to the masses.
Yeah.
This is probably the most like prose and straightforward deliveries, as far as just like his ideas are they're not masked in any like elaborate analogies or anything like that. You don't have to really get a lot of references with this track. He's very straightforward. And this is probably the only track that really does that as far as Milo's verses are concerned. But it comes off as very refreshing and exciting, especially because Sorcerer kind of picked up the pace for the album that was kind of going a more kind of laid back direction for like 2 or 3 songs in a row. Take Advantage of the Naysayer was overall refreshing and a really welcomed break at this point in the record when it was starting to feel a tad redundant.
Yeah, I agree. It feels definitely a little more structured because it has like, verse 1 hook, verse 2 hook.
Yeah.
I do like that in his hook he was kind of taking a kind of biting out of a old Method Man track, which he just says straight up. He was like listening to that Method Man song, but like he kind of took some things and flipped it around and kind of made it fit in that song, and I thought that was very very cool, very clever, and kind of just allude to classic hip hop, more mainstream traditional hip hop, and whatever. Because again, these still a fan of music, still a very well cultured person, so of course like he has that that background. And so I did appreciate that a lot. And I do agree with you that this track is very refreshing, especially because now at this point we're starting to, recognize that we're in for like, this album's 15 songs. So you're kind of like, okay.
Yeah, definitely on my first listen of this album, it was a little exhausting by the end. Because I didn't read the lyrics the first time through. And so I was definitely starting to get a little bit of a kind of jet lag through the record.
I also appreciate that he took so Milo and Open Mike Eagle and Bus Driver and stuff like that, all rappers that I very much love there. I guess they were part of this conglomerate of like called Hellfire Club.
Okay.
So they've, done some albums and done songs together and stuff like that. And it also kind of gets this feel that, they're just people because they go on tour together and they hang out and they do that.
Right.
And so I really appreciate this thing he said. I remember the art museum where Mike Eagle found Dubuffet or like whatever that French painter's name is. And I do like that. And sometimes just in their music in general, they have these meta references of just like, oh yeah, we did this. And this was really like, I just like that whole idea of like, oh yeah, him and I were at an art museum and he found this and this is really important to him, or this is an important moment to me. And it's just like, it kind of, and again, and that's one of the things I do appreciate about, just rap in general is when you have straightforwardness like that, you can just say those things and have these meta references to like your own life and other artists and stuff like that. And so I did appreciate that. When I listened to that the first time, I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, things like that, this is one of the more typical rap songs in its way that it does use very just more basic language.
Yeah.
And it's easy to follow lyrically. And you're not kind of twisted through all these analogies or anything like that. And I definitely agree with you. It's definitely a good track that deserves its place on the record. Now we come to my least favorite song. I don't know. My opinion is I don't know why I made the cut on this record. Because it's such a simple idea that could have just been embedded in another track. It sounds like an intro or an outro to another song.
Yeah.
It's not like it's saying that much, and that's fine. But like, especially when you're starting to get fatigued at this point in the album, that it's just kind of like, can you just cut this one? Like,
no, I totally understand because I felt the same way when I was listening through it, and like you, again, like I stated when we were getting through the last song, it's like this album's starting to kind of get a little long, and you're like, okay, and then you get to this song, and it feels like you could have just.
It almost feels like insulting to the fact that you're like looking at your watch, and then he's just sitting there saying, I don't know 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like, I think you do know, and stop. Yeah, definitely my least favorite track on the record, and kind of really exemplifies how you could have just put this idea in another song, and it's not the only song that could be combined. And it's one of those things where like, I do feel like this album could have worked with at least a couple like actual songs.
Yeah.
But we do move into yet another, which is one of the longest songs on the record. Which
love this record.
When I say longest, it's still like just shy of 4 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And
but we do
we get 4 rappers on here. We get 4 rappers. We have
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good.
With some of my favorite names ever. This is why I love alt rap. Like, we get Lord Ford 33, YCP Beno, or Bino, my favorite, Signor Benedict the Moor. And I'm just like, when I was reading that, like, the list of like artists on it, I was like, okay, like, and they all kind of do their thing. And I was like, okay, it felt, kind of like shy of a posse cut. Like,
yeah, it was. This is like the most like song feeling song on the entire record. And it's simply because, I mean, its length attributes to that. But then also too, you do have this sense of different sections because you do have 4 different verses on here. And thankfully, all the rappers have a certain diversity to them and their own style to them that makes this not a stagnant track. You do have these different voices, you do have these different rappers on, and that's very good because it breaks up the monotony, especially of like the last tune.
Yes.
So you have all these rappers and they all come with something to say.
Yes.
And I find that Yet Another serves as almost like a response song to the things that these artists are tired of. Whether it be things in the rap scene, things happening just in the country, certain injustices that they see. There's of course them talking about like the pointlessness of a lot of the songs and people in like the pop rap scene.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it's this song. I don't think it is. It might be, but talking about how rappers are basically just like blinged up in uniform kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just that picture is very interesting. But then you also have references to like, police shootings involving like innocent colored people and stuff like that. And so you have a lot of things expressed in this tune, and it's one of those kind of like everyone just kind of speaks their piece and moves on.
Yeah, it was.
And I think the title is really interesting, Yet Another, because just like gives this idea just like, oh, here we are again with this same crap. And it's all the stuff that they're tired of seeing, but they see over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of gives this sense of just kind of helplessness to these things that they're upset about, but they just want to talk about the fact that they're upset. But it definitely comes with a unique flavor that kind of makes this song interesting from start to finish.
Right, and it's just kind of crazy to me that even with that song, I feel like that's a song. Well, again, because we're getting closer to the end of the album, but still, like I feel like that song should have been a little bit closer to the end of the album, in the sense of like, you get to Yet Another and you still have about 3 tracks left and you're like, okay,
yeah,
I wonder how he's going to finish this up, so on and so forth. But I do like Yet Another. I do like that we get a lot of features on it. Everybody kind of, everybody gets their time to say what they need to say. It, felt like a really good track to me. I liked Yet Another, so
for sure. Then we move on to probably my favorite track.
Okay.
Ornette's Swan Song, featuring Self Jupiter.
Great name.
Oh yeah. It just has one of the most like astonishingly intense instrumentals and just jaw-dropping lyricism from both Self Jupiter and Milo.
Yes.
And it just kind of makes it one of the most compelling tracks. And this is one where like, even though I feel like they said everything they need to say, I wish this tune was longer, because you do have this like cool violin in there, and it just like, it has this epicness to it and this like emotion in the beat that's kind of lacking in a lot of the other instrumentals. You have it in some other tunes, like Note to Misses, like has this very ethereal, emotional sense to it. This one just has this kind of raw, like gut-wrenching, emotional feel to the instrumental. I will say one thing about it though. How much I'm into the tune depends like how I'm listening to it. Because I listened to it in my car, just like a low to medium volume, and it like didn't stick out to me. But like when I listened to it like with headphones, like at a good volume to really like grasp the whole song, like I was just overwhelmed with the sense of the tune. So the song kind of like depends for me. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's good. And then sometimes if I'm listening to it properly, I'm like just overcome with the sense of the tune.
Was Self Jupiter's verse is so good.
Oh, yeah, he blows me away.
So good.
Self Jupiter blew me away.
It's kind of like when I was listening to the song, it felt like I was listening to a man paint.
That's a good way to put it. Like, that's a good way to put it. It felt
like I was listening to a man paint. And it was like, because even just past the wordplay, because he was talking about, you know, because he does give you this imagery of, like, he says, you know, let me get out my rap display attaché case, practically a backpack where landscapes take shapes. And you're like, okay. And then he just starts kind of going through in this and making, like, deepening that analogy, and you're just like, I'm listening to this man paint. Like, he's for just real, like, just like, oh, it's Self
Jupiter. Like, I think that's possibly my favorite feature on the record, just because the lyricism is just too good, and the delivery, of course, is really great too. But oh man, yeah, this is one track that I'm just like, I wish it was longer, just so I had more to enjoy.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite track on the whole record. And I'm glad it comes at this point because, again, there's that fatigue at this point in the record. Yeah, honestly, other than the fact that sometimes it doesn't translate at lower volumes, other than that, really great tune. And not much negative to say about it from me, honestly. Now...
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Continuing with that song, I do like the line where he's, in America, all zebras are in a zoo, and that's normal, and that's fine. It will never make the news. Your captivity will never make the news. And it's like,
love, like, seriously, that was like one of those bone-chilling moments on this record for me, because it is such a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like that... I'm gonna listen to the song when this cast is over because I just have to.
Like,
I just have to.
It was one of those, you get those moments of just punching bleakness from this album, from just about, especially Milo, but there are moments where you're just like, oh God, and you're just like, oh my goodness.
The realness is there, and yeah, I seriously just need to listen to that song after this podcast because, man, such a good tune. So these last two tracks, here's one of my biggest problems with this album. Embroidering Machine, to me, is the last song on the album.
I agree. As much as I love Bus Driver as an artist, as much as I love Milo as an artist, I felt like that last song,
it makes no sense where it is.
Yeah.
Because here's my thing too, is Embroidering Machine has this huge like instrumental outro. It's not doing anything like too new with the lyrical content, but that's okay because to me this serves as a closer for the record. And imagining it as a closer makes more sense as a track. It's the longest tune. It lets you ride out the instrumental for a really long time. And he's like saying things like goodbye and stuff like this. Everything points to this being the last song. And it makes sense as the last song. And there's also this huge pit of silence after the song is over. To me, that's where the album was supposed to end.
Yes.
And then agree. Rapper featuring Bus Driver plays out like a bonus track that I didn't ask for. And so here's my thing. So I do love Bus Driver in this tune. And Rapper. His delivery feels like not of this decade, but like in a good way. And I'm of course not really familiar with Bus Driver's work as you are.
I'll put you on.
But his delivery is not at all what the modern sound is, but it's a sound that I really like. It's very rhyme heavy, but done in kind of like a more classic cadence and just really interesting. But you know what makes this feel even more like a bonus track and an afterthought to me? Milo's vocals also don't even sound as polished in this tune as they do on every other song on the album. And it almost sounds like it doesn't fit with the rest of the material because Milo sounds like just not quite as crisp.
Yeah.
So it really does play out like a B-side. And I don't understand that. I really don't. And I don't know if there's more to the song that's why it sounds that way, but it doesn't have the polished vocals for Milo. it comes at the most awkward place, and it's just a really strange footnote to the album.
So my question would be, because I definitely feel this way, do you think this song would be placed better somewhere else in the album?
Absolutely. I think I even wrote this down too. I feel like it should either be placed earlier in the album or literally just replace an earlier song in the album. Like replace I Don't Know with Rapper.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like, I think, you know, you can definitely take out I Don't Know and just replace it with Rapper, and that'll be just fine.
Rapper feels like a single that they just tacked onto the end of the album. Like it felt like a one-off.
Yeah, it felt like something that they already had kind of in the works, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, let me just retouch
like literally
this
just the
verse
fact that like Milo's vocals don't even sound right.
Yeah.
Like that to me tells me that it's not a part of this record. And just the way Embroidering Machine is a good end to this record, it would have been great if it ended there. But like, I think Rapper just really kind of solidifies any sense of fatigue you felt with the record. Because you got Embroidering Machine, you're like, and then it's like another song. And you're just kind of like, and then it kind of sinks in that you kind of got tired on the record. So I don't know why Rapper is here on the record. It makes no sense to me and is one of the things that holds it back from being a better album than it could have been. That just extraordinarily awkward placement that just punctuates the idea that this album at times goes on for too long and plays too much on a very finite bag of tricks. I think this can be a great album if you flesh out some more of the songs, make some cuts, maybe combine some tunes. Doesn't need to be 15 tracks. Not every song needs to be like 2 minutes. And don't break up the flow with an afterthought track after your record's supposed to end. Go ahead.
No, you got it.
Do I think this album is good? Yes. However, I'm left wanting more because it has incredible potential. And while I do think there's a certain X factor to it with the way that it was recorded and that kind of stuff, I can't help but wonder what the product could have been like if he took 48 hours or whatever, did like another 24-hour day. Maybe just fleshed out some of the song ideas a little bit more and thought long and hard about how the record carries and then made necessary cuts or revisions. Because all in all, sometimes this comes off like a really good mixtape. And while this is an album that I'll still revisit, it's one that I'm not gonna hesitate to skip certain tracks, which is sad for me because every track, save I Don't Know, has amazing lyrics to them, and I would love to sit there and dissect them. But at the end of the day, they're not interesting enough on themselves or within themselves as songs for me to think to go back and listen to them. And so that is a crucial thing that I think this album fell short on.
I can agree. I definitely, I too think this album is good. For those of you listening, I do recommend you give it, at least a couple listens, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. This is an album that you're probably going to at least, if you're going to check out like one or two songs, read the lyrics along with it because it's hard to get the point without doing that. Like my listens to this album didn't really mean anything until I started reading the lyrics. In my final huge pass through of the record, I sat there and dissected the lyrics as I listened to each song. This is also an album that I think can be happily shuffled. You don't necessarily need to listen to it
straight through.
It doesn't honestly flow in any such a way that demands it to be listened to a certain way. Shuffling is fine. Clearly, he didn't care about the order by putting rapper last as the ending tune.
Yeah, so. No, I definitely do recommend this album, and I do think people should check it out. I do like Milo. I do like this album. I just feel that there are certain points where, certain changes could have been, would have been definitely better in the sense of, like we said, taking out I Don't Know, potentially putting rapper in there, fleshing out some ideas. And so this wanting more from this album doesn't necessarily mean more tracks. It just
means not at all. We want, if anything, less tracks, but
more fleshed out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, keep the runtime. That's fine.
Yeah,
but flesh out the songs a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So like highlights for me on the album are probably like Note to Misses, Ornette's Swan Song, and Call and Form. Those are probably some of my favorite tracks.
I'm gonna go with Landscaping.
Very fair. Very fair.
Call and Form. For me, Paging Mr. Bill Nunn.
Word.
And I do like Yet Another.
Yeah,
I like Yet Another.
Yeah, Yet Another.
And Ornette's Swan Song.
Yeah, Yet Another is the banger of the record.
Also, shouts out to Take Advantage of the Naysayer. I thought that was
like too. Yet Another and Take Advantage of the Naysayer. Like, if you're not willing to jump fully into like this like art rap genre, those are two great songs because they are a little bit more prose and delivery. They're easier to follow.
Yeah.
And you don't have to sit there and dissect a bunch of lyrics. So if you're wanting more of a casual listen, those two tracks are great. Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out the record. Definitely interesting. I'm glad I listened to the record. And this album made me glad we're doing this podcast because probably wouldn't have checked out the record otherwise. And I got turned on to a very interesting album that had a lot to offer.
I think for a lot of people, the thing that also makes me happy is people who listen to our podcast who are probably going to be introduced to a subgenre of rap that they didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Because rap, like any other genre, has subgenres.
For sure. And I think people forget that when it comes to rap, pop, and metal. Those are like three that like people forget that there are subgenres. With rock, everyone knows that like alt rock is a thing and butt rock is a thing.
Yeah.
Like people understand to a degree subgenres within rock, but when you're dealing with pop, rap, and metal, to those who don't listen to those genres at all, don't really know. Like you're not really as familiar with like indie pop or like dream pop or art rap, alt rap, the other various genres, hardcore rap, gangster rap, all that stuff.
Horrorcore.
Yeah, nerdcore.
Do you know ICP is technically labeled horrorcore?
Did you know that
they had a march?
Did they really?
Yeah, because they are classified I think by the FBI as a gang. Like a low level like gang.
Right. I mean, because I can understand why that would be incredibly frustrating if that's not how you see yourself.
Especially because like it's on record that somebody said that a lot of like ICP gang crimes involve like petty theft and like assault and are very individualistic and not organized. So I'm like,
it's not a gang, then.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not a gang. But anyway, back to the point. But yeah, just definitely check out this record. If you get into Milo and you like art rap, guess what? I got more for you.
For sure. Which I'm sure we'll get to within the next couple weeks.
Absolutely.
The next album we're going to be checking out is Melancholia Hymns, the brand new album from a band that I love, Arcane Roots. It's an album I've been anticipating. I haven't heard it yet. I'm actually probably going to hit up Zia today and pick up the record.
I am going in so blind. I have no idea.
I'm very familiar with the band, and I've heard one of the singles, just one. It wasn't even the first single. And it definitely sounds like it's going to be an interesting record. So So I'm excited to check it out. Once again, that's Melancholia Hymns from the band Arcane Roots. It will be in the Spotify playlist that we have. Go ahead and follow that. You can check out all the albums that we have reviewed, and the next album that we will be reviewing will always be in that playlist. Also, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Mostly Existential, or you can just search the Mostly Existential podcast on Facebook. That's the best way to get in contact with us. Let us know what you thought of this album if you listened to it. Let us maybe know some other similar artists that you'd like to check out. If you want some recommendations for stuff, we both, are very much willing to give those. Yeah, tell us what you thought of this record. We're curious because obviously our opinions are just our opinions. We're curious about yours too. But until next time, we'll see you then. Using the same bass line as an outro.
Okay, so check this out. When I was at work, I want to say sometime last week, this guy came in, obviously crazy smacked,
okay,
and he goes to the clearance back to school stuff,
and
he gets the biggest binder he can find, and just starts putting stuff in it. Okay, cool. And he's like singing to himself. His pants are all falling off. It was obviously.
It sounds so surreal.
Yeah, I felt like I was watching somebody do a bit. That's how nuts it was.
Oh my gosh.
And then songs would come on and he would dance and everything, and I'm just looking at him, and it's this can't be real. There's no way that this is just happening. Like I said, it feels like I was watching somebody do a bit.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think it's really funny because then he goes up to the register, and instead of trying to deal it, well, he was, but he walks up to the person at the register who wasn't me. He's like, your manager said if I can get whatever I can fit in this binder for $5.99. And my coworker was like, okay, let me go talk to him for a second. He's like, no, I'm just joking. Hey, man, I'm playing. It's like, how did you think this was gonna go down?
I am so curious because he clearly approached this with a certain level of confidence.
Yes.
Has this ever worked for him in the past?
That's what I want to know. I have so many questions.
I would pay a good $10 just to know.
Right.
Even if the answer is just no, it hasn't worked yet. At least I knew.
Right.
At least I knew.
I mean, it's very possible that maybe he had gone to a back to school drive somewhere and they may have done that in the past. But because I know the company that we work for, and we've never done anything like that. I'm like,
I know, no big company does that as a promotion ever.
Right. So I'm like, where has this worked?
Yeah.
And when has this worked? And this can't have worked at another
company,
or else somebody just didn't check.
Yeah, for real.
Because you can clearly tell there's stuff in the binders. Because you buy binders and they're small. You come up and they're super thick. It's you have stuff in there.
Yeah. That's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so bizarre.